Face, when you clap, you are on the air.
Okay. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being produced here at Think Twice Radio, the home of the future. And we thank Richard Wicca, our producer. Thanks, Richard. I'm also here as the executive director of the Western New York Peace Center, and we're excited to have a special Earth Day session right now with our special guests. And I guess I'll just go counterclockwise to what I'm seeing. I see Keilka Salisbury. Hi, Keilka.
Yes, hello.
Who is
Hello.
a community activist. And I now, based on our conversation, I called you a naturalist. Is that right? Kind of?
I guess you could say that.
Yeah. So anyway, so we got Keilka, we've got Paul, Winnie. Paul is a Seneca. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Who's been
Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you both. And it's great to have Ellen Banks of the Sierra Club. All kinds of roles you have with the Sierra Club. Thank you.
Several. Yep.
Yes,
Thank you for
do.
having me.
I was doing my research, yeah. And of course, friend of this show and just plain friend, Agnes Williams of the Indigenous Women's Initiative and Neck and all kinds of good activities that we're involved in together. Hi, Agnes.
Greetings.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Actually, you know, I wonder if, could you do like I don't know how brief, we didn't talk about this, but if you wanted to do some kind of a very brief opening of welcome or of thanks.
Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to you. I was talking to you, or I could have been talking to Paul. So I just thought it might be a nice way to start this off. Would one of you want?
Usually the men do it.
Right, I know. That's where Paul, do you want to do one? Would you?
I don't speak Ganonio.
No.
That's what you're.
No, but I just, you know, in terms of Thanksgiving, you know, just a very, I mean, I've done it sometimes in a very inadequate way, but just with the thinking and the thanking for our Mother Earth and for all of the beauty, all of the elements, all of the creatures. And
Yeah. Okay. My name is Paul Winnie, Tonawanda, Seneca, Atayoni. I'm with the Wolf Clan, and I just wanted to start with a little Thanksgiving address to help clear our minds and give thanks to the Creator and all that's provided for us and all the things that we can learn on this earth. And it starts off with the the waters and the earth and the plants, and give thanks to the animals, the four-legged and the two-legged, for the food that we get to eat, with the plants and the medicine plants, everything in the skies, and everything that we need to exist here is provided for us, and the guidance of all our relations. And so hopefully we'll all come here with a good mind, and we'll enjoy each other's company and have a safe trip on our way home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul. That really, you know, it makes such a difference. So anyway, I'm grateful. Thanks.
Sure.
So what we wanted to talk about for Earth Day is about how we're going to get where we need to get, and about just how thorny the issues are that are in our way. So sometimes people are calling it a just transition, but it's somehow, you know, what we need to do to stop the climate catastrophe that is well on its way, that is not a question, you know, that has clearly been happening, and that is there's a certain amount of it that will happen no matter what we do. So we have a lot to do to try to mitigate that for the sake of Mother Earth and all of the creatures and the creation and our own very own existence. Because as some people have said, well, the Earth will keep going on, but it's the people who may not make it because of the mess that we've made, and the things that we've done that have altered things. So, I like to, so maybe if we want to talk about people's thinking about that in a general way before we get into specifics on specific projects, because I know, there are a couple of projects that have been really difficult and that are have a lot of questions associated with them, and that's not unusual for a lot of the projects too. I think of every kind for energy. So so people's thought. I want to just say, what does it mean to you, just transition? Maybe that's a good way to start. If that's a phrase that you've used or that, you wonder, you have some thoughts about. Keilka, I know we didn't talk about this necessarily. So just if anybody, let's say anybody wants to share a thought about what is a just transition, we could start off that way.
I'd be glad to start if others are kind of thinking about what they want to say. I don't want to
Go ahead.
step in front of anyone.
Sure.
So my organization and I are very concerned about holding off the climate crisis by putting an end to all mining and burning of fossil fuel. And to do that, we want to take advantage of the bounties of nature, the sun and the wind. And we want to do that in a way that's safe and harmless and that provides a just transition. And what that means to me and my group is that people have not all been equally harmed by all the things we're burning right now and polluting the atmosphere with. People of color, people of low income, people in densely populated places like cities are very much harmed down to breathing and loss of life, of shortness of life by the things that we're burning now, besides polluting the atmosphere for the whole world. So what we're looking for is a way to make a transition that is fair and that does not do any real harm to the other species that we've kind of put ourselves in charge of with no consent from them. And our position, after studying this in a scientific way and looking at the numbers, what do we really need to do to stop this? We've come to the conclusion that some larger types of energy, clean energy, are necessary, along with the smaller solutions that we can all do in our own homes, like better insulation, solar panels, if those are available. Geothermal heating in the future is a great solution, but we're also going to need some large-scale wind and solar, and we believe this can be done in a way that does not do any harm. It's new to look at, which bothers some people, but it should be in the right places. It should be done after a very careful inventory of the natural beings in the area, which we have kind of a checklist for before we endorse any project. We want to make sure that it is being done in the safest way possible. So I don't want to monopolize the discussion, but just to start it off, that's the position that I represent. And I'd be glad to answer any questions about that.
Thanks, Ellen. So does anyone else want to share some thought about that concept of a just transition? I know I've heard it, and I've heard it in that kind of a way of trying to make changes in a way that works on a lot of the issues. And one of the things at the Western New York Peace Center that we do a lot of is trying to unite the struggles or seeing them as very connected. So there's a way that, there are ways that a lot of violence is being done to people and the planet. And so we see that as being very connected. So as we try to stop doing violence to the planet, that we also want to stop doing violence to people, that they should not be oppressed, that people should have what they need, and that there should be, as Cornel West says, justice is what love looks like in public, that we are loving and fair with each other so that people all have what they need instead of some with way more than they need and others who don't have what they need. So, so I think the just transition is meant, or the concept is meant to work on all those things at once. So like people need jobs, so some of the jobs can come, people can be busy helping that change to happen to different ways of taking care of each other and our needs, right? And our including whatever energy needs or something. So those are some thoughts. But so maybe unless somebody has something more they want to share about that, maybe Aggie. Yes, I was wondering if you would, but I didn't want to put you on the spot. So what do you think about it, Aggie? Agnes, what are you thinking?
Okay, when we talk about a just transition,
Mm-hmm.
it's within the context of the first and world development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the problem.
So, the development of the first and second world, that's basically European white folks. The development of their worlds is dependent upon the underdevelopment of the third world, which is people of color, slavery, low wages, and no development in the fourth world, which is the indigenous people. Now, this is the first and second world capitalist economic paradigm that the context of the words just transition is being interpreted.
Mm-hmm.
Within that context. So it doesn't really allow for third and fourth world people to have their needs met. It only allows for the first and second world needs to be met. And the need that's trying to be met with these just transitions is this insatiable greed and need for energy. Now, we faced this in the last century. We all were told that, we had to be the national sacrifice and sacrifice our lands and our homes for the energy, the development of the energy. In Allegheny, it was the Kinzua Dam. In Tuscarora, it was the Robert Moses Project. In Onondaga, it was the two nuclear plants in Oswego. And in Akwesasne territory, it was the Alcoa and the General Motors plant, which it was all sold to everybody as being just because, you're all going to have a job.
Uh-huh.
As a person of color, you can become part of the first and the second world. You'll have a job. And then in my community at Cattaraugus, what we got was a nuclear waste dump. Mm. We got nuclear waste. And the federal government has a policy you've been part of this since 1492. And that policy is a sacrifice area. So it's just understood by the first and second world white supremacist people that in order for them to have their needs met, then the brown people, the black people, and the indigenous people, the red people, they all got to sacrifice so that we can turn on our lights and leave them on as long as we want to leave them on. We can run our water as long as we want to run our water. So this is the problem with this economic paradigm and these development projects. The whole conversation around development really needs to be discussed with fourth and third world people at the table, and not just white first and second world supremacist people who think their needs come first.
The only thing I'd say is I would say what I was talking about or what I was thinking about is about the first, the third and fourth world getting those needs met when we're talking about the needs, and also what the needs are is back to, I think that's a big question. So, you know, that people to be scaling back and having a different idea of what needs, so that's where the fairness comes in. So as you point out, it's been extreme oppression in this country and in the world, for sure.
In Western New York, New York.
Oh, and right here.
In Allegheny, people died from a broken heart when they burned down their homes and made them move so they could have a Kinswood Dam, so they could have power to power the first and second world. And they've even closed that dam now. They don't even use it anymore. All of these notions of, oh, this is what we need, and we got to have this, so let's take it away from, you know, the indigenous people. You know, that is the problem, because it's a white supremacist mentality.
Right. Well, first of all, so thank you for reframing that in a way that really highlights what the issue is, because that was what I was trying to say in terms of the issue. But of course, no one is going to be able to say it like you, who hasn't had that experience. So I want to thank you for that. And so I think that's a good segue for looking at these projects that we wanted to talk about. And first of all, I want to appreciate that you all are willing to come on this. And this is why we're talking peace, because I don't think we're going to solve everything. I think we're going to talk about what the issues are and what, you know, where the issues are. So so let's take these two projects that we wanted to talk about, and maybe let me ask you, Paul, which one would you like to start with? I think I put it down as us talking about the stamp one first. Do you want to talk about that
The
first?
stamp project?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so why don't you lay that out, because I know that's one of, and you're very involved with both of these issues. So we'll start with that one. Why don't you lay that out for us, exactly what is going on, how you see it.
Yeah, first I wanted to talk about that transition point just a little bit.
Sure,
You know,
absolutely.
Well, let's see, I'm 66 years old, so what I've seen in my lifetime probably relates to the other people here. You know, the first Earth Day, you know, when we were in school, and here we are 50 years later. And the transition that, if we're talking about just transition in relationship to indigenous people, is we have still 500 years of genocide, and everything has been basically taken away from us. I mean, we are an endangered species of less than 1% of the population of the United States. Yet we're not classified in that as an endangered species. But our lands have been taken. We've been removed from our Aboriginal territories in most cases, if not all cases. And the situation with the developments, we're in a repeat situation of instead of land speculators moving in and missionaries coming in and eventually getting the land that they in possession, losing possession of the land, has brought us to the point where we're now facing development as the same type of land speculators, investors, energy companies, now trying to move onto our areas. And in regards to the stamp plant, what I'll be talking about, the stamp plant is an Genesee County economic development has made a project area on our western border of the Tonawanda Seneca Nation. And that's where they've been trying to propose an economic development and use the area as being halfway between Rochester and Buffalo to purport their location strategy. But the strategy, unfortunately, has us on the west. The National Iroquois Wildlife Refuge is on the north side, along with the State Wildlife Preserve and the White Wildlife on the other side. So on three sides of this thing, basically, you have the most pristine natural habitat area in northern western New York. And so it's a shame that something like this has to be brought here right on our doorstep. And recent developments on the project has, maybe the viewers have seen some articles in Buffalo Evening News and such, of bringing Plug Power Incorporated back there, which is to manufacture a hydrogen in the area. So we'll have to deal with the pollution and the change of our cultural environment here as a problem. And for anybody that doesn't know too much about it, it's a large, several thousand acres of land that they want to use to bring in other companies. And I guess that's just a problem issue with us, is that we're so rural, and I like to speak about the wildlife at the same time because they don't have the voice.
Right.
And to put something like that, and many of my friends agree, that you couldn't have picked a worse spot to put this thing, much less like solar facilities and windmills in certain areas that are very detrimental to the natural habitat for the wildlife. And they're the ones that suffer more than we do, because that is their life completely. Right. We move, we adapt, we go someplace else if we have to, but those animals can't do that. They suffer and they die. So plants, trees, and the animals. So that's what I like to try to make sure that people understand, just because they don't have a voice. But I can tell you, and Keilka can give you some more figures on this recent company if it does come, because this place does not have any running water. There's no sewer facilities. There's no electric facilities there. They're going to be sinking millions and millions of dollars in trying to set up this infrastructure, where it could, in my mind, could be done someplace else, a lot more easier than it is bringing and using all this water and having no waste management, chemicals and regular water, just to have this thing here. Last year I drove up to the Erie County, or the Genesee County building in Batavia to pick up a environmental survey from their office. And I got up by their airport. I sort of take the back roads from our direction, and there was fields, all kinds of cornfields, farm fields, the same thing that's right here, but it's right there in an established area. And I just assume that it's more of a, I guess some of us make it like a, the word is culture cancel, that if they put these things near the reservations in our territories, that it's an easier way to keep the genocide going, where we would be assimilated, because now we're surrounded by one of the arguments that I made both at the Horseshoe Solar Plant down in Caledonia and town of Rush, and it applies to my hometown, is the Treaty of 1826. And that, the Big Tree Treaty of Buffalo Creek of 1826, we relinquished the lands in the Genesee Valley, these 6 reservations, a part of Buffalo Creek and part of Tonawanda. Tonawanda was quite big. Buffalo Creek Reservation was quite big. And that treaty was never ratified by Congress. And so my main thing, because I would think that that is the main argument before you argument not building here, not building there, that the territory is Seneca land. And I'll read a brief statement from the Council of Chiefs from the Tonawanda. Just wanted to, in a letter that they sent to the Horseshoe Project as part of the Article 10 procedure, made a statement regarding that. And in a letter from Tonawanda to the State Office of Parks on December 10th, 2019, of when they were first starting to do the Horseshoe Solar Project, given the importance of this territory to the nation and its status as a federally protected reservation, the project area should be removed to avoid the high sensitivity areas in and around the Genesee River and the Canawaugus Reservation. So they're making a point that it's a federally protected reservation. Now, moving on to basically a year later, on January 4th of 2021, in a letter from Tonawanda's Council of Chiefs to the New York State Public Service Commission, the nation also notes that the applicant's environmental justice analysis fails to take into account impacts of the project on the Indian nations whose cultural resources would be affected and whose reservation territories would be included in the project's APE. As the nation made clear in its letter of December 2019, the Canawaugus Reservation remains treaty-protected land until and unless Congress explicitly diminishes or disestablishes the reservation. Its boundaries continue to define a territory to which Tonawanda Seneca Nation and the Seneca Nation Indians have sovereign jurisdictional rights. See E.G. McGirt versus Oklahoma, 2020. The reservation is tribal land. So I guess that's what I'm just trying to put in context. Sure. That doesn't really get brought out, that that's their position. That's been my position in those cases. So anything we argue over, to me, that's primary. Because we need to address that issue before, so that you wouldn't have to address anything else if we establish that. So that's something that I've been an issue since the 90s when I was first found out some of this treaty. Well, there was a lot of, was involved with a lot of the tax protesting back in that, and which led me into treaty research and that kind of a thing. So that's, I'm not an expert, but that's just some of the background that I can bring to the table.
Well, I'm sure that you have a lot of expertise in the things in those things that you have researched. So I thank you for bringing out that. And is there something? Do you have a response? What do you think about that, Ellen, when you hear that?
Well, there's so many different parts of that. When it comes to the plug plant, I am in agreement. And I have actually, I'll disclose, I've actually spoken to Alex Page, the attorney representing the Tonawanda Seneca. She reached out to me. My organization hasn't completely taken a position on that, but that's just because we haven't had enough time to discuss it. I think almost everybody, with one exception, who it turns out to be an investor in it, agrees. It's a terrible location for it. Hydrogen is a really untested energy solution, and the only place it seems to me that it's worth doing at all is right near where it's going to be consumed, which is certainly not the case there. So if you had something, hydrogen's something that can power heavy equipment, where the batteries would be too enormous to electrify it. That's a little in the weeds, but I could see a proper hydrogen plant in the future being in a proper location, which this certainly is not, and producing hydrogen only from water, which isn't a guarantee, and not producing any wastewater, and certainly not consuming any water in either the indigenous territory or in the wildlife reserves. I personally will argue for that in my organization, and I think it's a terrible idea for so many reasons. So it's going to involve trucking the hydrogen to long distances away in diesel trucks, which just by itself makes it useless. And right. Most hydrogen now uses more energy to produce than it produces. So it's kind of stupid, honestly. I could see a future for it and properly done, but and they're talking about shipping it through natural gas pipes, which we're still fighting against, right. Pipelines,
right.
And
right.
and it tends to deteriorate the pipelines, making them leak even more. So it's just wrong in every way.
And then there's the water question, by the way.
And the water question, and I have had the privilege of paddling on Oak Orchard Creek, and it's a very, just for people living in Buffalo, it's a very popular spot. I dumped my canoe there and fell in the water, but I love the creek anyway. But more importantly is the indigenous territory and the wildlife reserves, where I go from time to time with my bird watching friend to watch birds, and was going to go last week. So those are just personal things. The more important thing is the infringement on the territory. When it comes to Horseshoe, I wish they'd done a lot more advanced study of the area they were talking about, and our staff representative on the ground has been looking at whether there are solutions that don't infringe on those treaty areas, and we as the Sierra Club will not endorse that project if it does. And by the way, our staff person is a person of color who has a cultural history of colonialism, so of being the victim of colonialism. Right. So we are not going to, we have a procedure for endorsing projects, as I mentioned earlier, and we're going to add a piece to that, which is infringement on indigenous territory. It's just, we have wildlife, we have farmland, we have forests, and that is it's a new assessment, but that's something we need to add to it. I feel very strongly about that. Solar in general can be done in proper locations without harming the land. It's even compatible with agriculture in the same spot, certain types of agriculture. It doesn't do any harm. It can be dismantled quickly if other forms of energy come about. Farmers tend to have a lot of excess land that they might sell off for giant warehouses or housing tracts. This gives them a chance to use some of their land and make a little income so they can stay as farmers. So that's one look at it. And I do think, with great respect to Agnes, that I think I envision a future where everyone has electricity and that it's generated in the safest and cleanest method possible. And we're acutely aware that around the country, many Native people do not have electricity or plumbing or other utilities and all those things. And that's a terrible thing. But we think a future with electricity, with safe heating of homes and cooling as the climate gets hotter, and transportation that doesn't create any emissions, because we're a very spread out country, all of us, white, and Indigenous and people of color, it's not realistic to be able to live just within a half mile of where, to have everything within a half mile of where we live anymore. And we think that transportation will be necessary, and electricity and plumbing and those things will be necessary in the least harmful way possible. That's how I feel about it. But I'm very concerned about the plug plant and what Genesee County is trying to do. I think it was very poorly planned and it shouldn't happen.
I can add to that if people don't understand
Please.
what kind of hydrogen production they want to do. Hydrogen has been produced primarily using fossil fuels. They call this green because they don't use fossil fuels. In this case, New York Power Authority is basically giving them free power or low cost power. In fact, Plug Powers do what I saw, $269.5 million in tax breaks and power discounts for this project, which is a huge amount, given that they are saying that they're only going to have 68 jobs available there. What green hydrogen, how hydrogen is produced through green hydrogen process is a process called electrolysis, where they use water and they use electricity to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen. So, and then they put the hydrogen in the hydrogen cells. This requires a lot of clean water to do this. I did a bit of research on the amount of water, and this is what is alarming to me, very alarming. In addition to the fact that they are looking to put their wastewater into the water tributaries into
Orchard Tree
the Oak Orchard
Creek.
Marsh Creek, along with Whitney Creek, which they all feed into each other in that area.
And onto Lake
But
Ontario,
it takes,
of course. Excuse me for interrupting.
It takes
Eventually.
It takes 9 tons of purified water to create 1 ton of hydrogen. Okay. They want to use our municipal water for this. They have a large water system that they're developing so that they can get as many gallons to the STAM project site as they can. Now, the water needs to be purified before it can be separated, and that brings the water amount up to about conservatively 18 tons of water for 1 ton of hydrogen, because they're still going to have to purify that water before they use it to split it. It's a lot of clean drinking water, and anybody that knows anything about water, we don't have a lot of clean water on this planet that we can drink. So I'm not sure that this is really a wise thing to do to basically separate water. And that water doesn't come back into our water cycle. Right. That's the other concern. It's gone. And you can't manufacture water.
No.
So, and if we're thinking about the generations to come, we're using their water for, if this does go through, for batteries that are going to power forklifts for things like Amazon and Walmart. So is it worth it? And I'd like to know more about what they're doing there. But it's frightening. They, in the news, a news article cited them as one of the project directors through the Genesee County Economic Development Center, as they wanted to produce 45 tons of hydrogen per day from that site. So when I say it takes 18 tons of water to take one. So times 45 times 18.
Mhm.
That's a lot of clean water.
What I worked out the numbers, approximately 300,000 gallons a day.
And they're wanting to take this water from the whole region. In fact, they're looking at Monroe County as being a key player in supplying this water.
So that I haven't heard any. Well, even so, Ellen, you were saying you don't think the stamp project makes sense. As it's,
Yeah, and I want to make it clear, I'm not completely speaking for the Sierra Club at this point, although I think I'm speaking for most of it. But also, as Agnes has wisely reminded us, the Niagara Power Project was not done in a just manner. But now that we have it, it seems to me the worst thing we could do is to use that power for a purpose like this, rather than using it for legitimate purposes for all the people who live in this region. I don't know if anyone's for actually removing the Niagara Power Project, but it shouldn't be used to do this kind of crazy manufacturing. It should be more justly distributed among people for their needs to live, not for profit, not for greed. And it's too bad Genesee County decided to put up this big project, and now they're saying, well, what are we going to fill it with? Well, let's do that. But that's backwards planning. They should have thought about doing this big project and to recruit industry to, rather than we've got this big project, now we have to put a factory in it. It's dumb, in my opinion.
so maybe we don't have this big project. Is that something that can be? I mean, how far along is it?
There's nothing there yet.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So, so let's say, so it sounds like everything wrong with this. We've just heard, the land claim is wrong, and the wildlife and the pristine area and the beauty and the Minnewachuny, the water is life, the water that we need, that we take mammoth amounts of. So forget that one. So let's talk about the Horseshoe one a little bit. And I want to say, I wish, Ellen, that you had been with us, and even now, I guess this is part of it. When we had a rally there not too long ago, I can't even think, when was it, Paul?
Indigenous Peoples Day.
Oh, yes, right. Of course it was. Of course it was. Yes.
How can you forget that?
How can I forget that? Because, I'm only aspiring to get to the point where every day is an Indigenous Peoples Day, so that may be why I didn't think of it. Because as we need to be so, and we are learning so much every day. So I want to say that being there and hearing people talk about Canawaugus, hearing people talk about their families, their feeling in the area, and seeing the trees that were being murdered, having that line put around these beautiful old trees that are being just cut off from their water supply to kill them off for this project.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that project. So, so that yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Agnes.
I just had something I wanted to go back and emphasize about both projects.
Sure.
And what they have in common.
Mm-hmm.
Now Vicki called it land claims.
But
and,
I'm sorry if it was a wrong word.
Well, it's kind of the illusion, that that the first and second world, has a claim to any of this land.
No, there's no claim. I didn't mean that. I meant the right.
But that's the doctrine of discovery, and that's the papal bulls, 15th century, and white European people think that they're above everybody and they can come in and take and claim anything they want because they say so. Now, it's been going on since the 15th century, and that's part of what's got to change in this economic paradigm. And just to go back to that, when we talk about the treaties, we don't have land claims
Land
This
rights.
is our land.
Right, land rights.
Nobody here has a land claim. The whites don't have a land claim. The Indians don't have a land claim.
Right.
This is our land. We're on original territory here. We were here first. You know, our maker put us here. And we have that spiritual connection to our land because he didn't put the Europeans here. He put them